what is it that brought you to the SE community? How did you arrive on the SE Discord?
I found one of Anthony's videos, which seems like a pretty common way for people to end up there. And I remember the first one that I watched, it was about religion. I think it was his conversation with what's his name, Daniel, who had been I remember Daniel because Daniel now has a channel about atheism. I think his first name was Daniel. So they had this conversation. It was two students who were both very strongly believing in God. And they were both very involved in recruiting people to their church on campus.
Gotcha.
And it was such a wonderful, calm conversation where nobody got mad. And I was comparing that to the conversations that I have heard about religion. I was raised Catholic, and there was definitely a point in my life where I believed in God. I went to Catholic school for not my whole childhood, probably like half. So, I mean, it was a significant part of my life. I still have a lot of good things to say about the church. My mother is still involved in it. But when I think of deconversion and how slowly and gradually it happened for me and how there was never like an aha moment, I don't think that I can really remember. It was such a gradual transition. It never caused me problems with my mother, even though she's still in the church. Like, she has never given me any kind of, she's never given me a hard time that I don't go anymore. It's not something that we really even talk about, like, to be super honest, but I know that she's okay with it. I know that she's not angry with me. So it was kind of my own process for that was not a big deal. I didn't have any resistance from the people that I knew, but I have met people that are just very, very fervent, and I've been on the sidelines of some just incredibly nasty conversations about religion, where people were just screaming at each other. And I kind of realized watching Anthony's videos that I just don't have conversations like that. Like, I just try to avoid it at all costs. And when, two of my friends start going at it over religion, like, I just am silent and trying to get away, which is also the same thing for politics, really. I have people pretty far on opposite sides of the political spectrum in my own family. And I think it's just this really great skill to be able to have those conversations. And right now I'm just completely intimidated by them. And the idea that, like, someone would go have hard conversations as a hobby is kind of blows my mind. I had a friend in college who was on the debate team, and he liked to pick fights, which is what I thought of it then. And that is kind of how I went about it. He wasn't going about it in an SE kind of way. He was going about it as a, I'm right and I'm going to show you that you're wrong kind of way. So he was kind of combative about it. And I remember, like, backing out of several conversations with him, and him being kind of like, oh, you don't, it doesn't interest you to talk about this? I thought this was an interesting subject. And it's like, not really, no, I'm good, thanks. So that's always been how I've handled hard conversations, is to run away from them and not have them and be completely silent during them.
That's awesome. It's interesting to notice, isn't it? The way you described your deconversion process is this kind of gradual, that there's no aha moment. It was a gradual change for you to go from somebody who believed in God to somebody who no longer believes in God. That's a gradual thing. It happens over time. And I imagine that you were doing most of the work involved in thinking about it in that space, right, that got you through there. And yet the people that you're talking about, the ones that are having these hard conversations about difficult topics, they're going out looking for a fight. They want a win. They want victory in the moment of the conversation. And it's interesting to notice the difference in how people approach these conversations versus how people actually change their minds about things. I think that's super good. How old were you when you started to question God? And can you recall anything particularly that started you thinking about religion differently?
So I went to Catholic school from 3rd grade to 8th grade. And I don't remember thinking a ton about whether or not it was true. I definitely thought about whether or not things felt right or wrong. And I know some Catholic churches are very, I guess, conservative, but the one that I was going to school at was, so for instance, we had real sex education. There was no homophobia that was taught. There might have been some, buried somewhere in the minds of people running it, but it wasn't, it's like you see the laws coming out in Florida right now. It's just like, oh my God. Well, that was not how the Catholic school that I went to was.
Right.
There were teachers in the school who were not Catholic.
That's cool. Yeah.
And they made sure, we did have a class that was religion, and they made sure that a teacher who was Catholic had religion. So if you were assigned a teacher that was not Catholic, then you would, for 45 minutes go over to someone else's classroom. But it was, I don't know, it was a nice place. I have no, looking back, I have no complaints about the education or about what was taught, and that was part of it. And I always went along with it. It didn't really occur to me to wonder that much whether I believed in God or not. And when I was switching from that school to a public high school, I remember there was a worry about I might not go to church very much anymore. And I talked about it with the teacher, and she said, well, if you ever want to go to church, I lived pretty close, and she said, if you ever want to go to church, I'll pick you up and take you to church. Don't worry about it. And because at the time, church was part of school, and I didn't really go to church outside of that with my mom. So we didn't go to church on Sunday. The school had a church service on Friday.
So when that wasn't there, you were worried that you were how am I going to maintain this?
Doing this, and I want to keep doing it. And what if, what if my mom doesn't take me and I want to go and I miss it? And my teacher was just like, I'll just pick you up and take, which was very nice of her. And then my mom took me. Once I was out of that school, we started going together on Sunday, and I was involved in it. I was in the choir. I really liked music, and so did my mom. So that was something that we did together, and but I realized over time that it was more social for me, and that I just didn't really, I just didn't really believe the root of it, that I wanted to go to see my friends because I made my friends at school and that's where they were.
Right.
So it wasn't the doctrine that made me miss it and want to go to it. And then the friends that I made at that school kind of scattered, and I had, different friends that I made at the public high school. And I just kind of fell away from the habit of going to it. And then, I don't know, I guess just as I grew up, I do remember one conversation, one of those really bad conversations where two of my friends now in college, one who was very, very science-based and looking for evidence, and another who was very fervently religious and believed very strongly in God. And they were just screaming at each other. And I heard people say almost word for word what she was saying in in Anthony's talks. She was saying, God is real because I believe in him. Like, me believing in him makes it my reality. And our other friend was just not having that, and they were really mad at each other. I think pretty soon after that, she stopped hanging out with us. And I don't blame her, because, I mean, I could see how she felt attacked. And
Yeah.
I'm sure he felt attacked too, because she was not saying very nice things to him either. And so just like kind of being around conversations like that, I kind of started to, it's like my first reaction to that is like, oh yeah, who even knows that God exists? And that became like, why do I think that God exists if I don't know? And then just other little things like people attributing to God things that to me are just clearly like, that's not God. Like I even heard people attributing to God something that they worked really hard on doing.
Right.
Thank God I got this job. I'm blessed because I got this job. It's just like, you got that job because you worked your butt off for that job. Like, why, give yourself credit. And I had, this was years ago, but I had a very severe illness, and I was in the hospital for a while, and my grandmother, and I think she truly believes this, said that I got better because of how she was praying for me. And it's just like, no, I got better because of surgeons. Like, that's why I got better. I didn't tell her that, because I don't like conversations. So, I said, thank you for praying for me.
It's kind of sad. I mean, if you believe the thing that often goes unsaid here is that if you believe that, then you have to believe that it was also God's will that you got sick in the first place, and that maybe were you not praying? Was your grandmother not praying enough for you prior to you getting sick, and that's why God made you sick? Is that what we're saying here? Like,
exactly.
It's a worrying worldview. I don't. People say they find it very comforting. I honestly have never really kind of understood why that would be comforting. That would be slightly more alarming than I think.
Exactly.
Not only do you have to get through the idea that you've gotten sick and have to deal with all of that, but also you have to deal with the idea that maybe God wanted it to be that way. And then now what have you done? How do you square that? And yeah, it's weird. And of course they tend to, if something fantastic happens, that's God intervening, and if something terrible happens, then that's just the frailty of humanity, and it's us being sinful creatures. It seems.
And if you don't understand it at all, then God works in mysterious ways. It's just like there's an answer for everything.
Could not agree more. I think that
was a big part of it. I think like that's one of many incidences of, not even necessarily things that have happened to me, but things that I see happen to other people, things that just happen in the world. It's like, if there is a God, and I can't 100% say that there is not, because I also think that it can't be disproven. Mm-hmm. So if there is one, which there might be, I don't know, I don't think it's a particularly benevolent God.
Yes. It would be hard to square that with some of the apparent realities that we live in, yes. This is sort of uncharitable, but it can be uncharitable. It's a very difficult thing to say, but it feels to me that based on what you're saying and how you've described it, it feels to me like I'm not getting a sense from you that you ever really believed in God necessarily, more that you kind of, it felt like when you were younger, you went along with the idea because of church and your family, and there was an idea, and it seems like the first, it felt from your story that the first time you came to need to think about the question yourself, you didn't really.
It was
easy. You found that you didn't believe it in any case. It almost felt like that seems.
Yeah, it was pretty easy to make that. It was pretty easy to make that transition.
Could you ever remember really acting and believing in God? Did you ever remember feeling like it was certainly true? Did you ever remember being confident in it being real?
I never had. Like in a lot of these conversations, people say that they had an experience where they were sure, where they were, filled with peace, or where their prayer was answered. Mm. And I never really had a moment like that. And I always, I mean, I had moments, where I felt peace, and I had moments where good things happened to me, but the reasoning was always very clearly attributable to something that was happening in the real world that I could see. And I mean, I did have good experiences in the church, but it was so easy to tie those to the people in the church that I liked. I had a wonderful conversation with she was the principal of the school, and she was a nun. And I had a bullying problem in middle school. Someone made up a rumor that, I had a boyfriend and all of this, and I know, well, and you think, at a Catholic school, and they, it was all the way. Someone made up a rumor that I was having sex with this guy who was like in a class or two above me. And I did something really stupid, which was it was a friend of mine, and I did see him outside of school. And like we went to a movie together, and I think we held hands. And then I came into school the next day, and someone, I heard about you and so. And I said, oh yeah. And she said, so that happened? And I said, yeah. And I thought, so I really set myself up for it. But that just started this terrible situation. And his class had a very aggressive bully, like aggressive to the point where a teacher would follow him around at recess sometimes because he was and I mean, he, now as an adult looking back, I know that, he had a really bad home situation. It's like, I know why. But I was really scared for a little bit, and the principal called me to her office, and I was really scared of that because I thought, oh my God, this principal thought, that I'm 13 and had sex with like a 15-year-old, and she's going to rip me a new one. And she didn't. And she was so calm, and she just asked me if it was true, and I said no. And I think, in part of that conversation, I think we probably like ended with a prayer or something like that. It was just me and her in her office, and I don't remember it too clearly. But I do remember just being, this is okay. But it didn't feel like it was okay because of God. It felt like it was okay because, the principal is going to listen to me.
You had an
as a human
taking you as an adult. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were many incidences like that. That was kind of the most, I realize that's not really very significant in the grand scheme of things.
No, I know what you mean. One of the things you hear often is people attributing all kinds of seemingly mundane things to God. They won't say that they had an inspirational thought. They will say God spoke to them. They give themselves, as you say, no credit for it. And then, God intervened and gave the nun the presence of mind and patience to listen to your story properly. You could say that, or you could say that the nun was a sensible nun that probably, I'm sure
maybe
for this.
She would have attributed that to God.
Maybe it would be interesting. Yeah.
Her being a nice human.
Yeah, and perhaps a little bit more experienced at being a headmistress than a 13-year-old would have assumed, quite reasonably. I bet that's not the first time she's been through this situation before.
Oh, no. She's been doing that for 30 years.
Exactly. So it would be unusual. So yeah, I think these tendencies to equivocate these things as religious, give them a religious context is, again, it seems strange for sure. But again, it doesn't seem like there was ever, again, there doesn't seem to be a point where you really it feels like you believed it necessarily, unless can you think of a time that you would say you really believed in God? I find it interesting, I'm
thinking way far back. I'm thinking way back to like little kid memories. I did used to pray, like outside of church. I did used to pray. I think I believed in it to the extent that all children believe in something like magic or Santa Claus or ghosts. Or I really believed in ghosts when I was a little kid.
Awesome.
I was terrified of ghosts. I had ghosts in my room. I was super convinced. My mom bought me a fake gun to defend myself against the ghosts that were in my room.
How very Catholic of her.
Great placebo. If anyone who happens to watch this has a kid who's afraid of ghosts, this worked great on 5-year-old me.
This message brought to you by the NRA.
I think it was a water gun. It was like really brightly colored.
That's awesome. That's cool. Sorry, that was just hilarious. This is where Ghostbusters
really stopped believing in all of that stuff. Remember, I stopped believing in Santa Claus really young because I found presents that were from Santa in my mom's closet when I was playing hide and seek. And I didn't tell her, but I found them because I was concerned that there would be no presents if she knew that I knew.
Sensible, rational move, I would say. Yeah, absolutely. So again, this might sound uncharitable. One of the things that's interesting about atheism versus religion is that it's not a like for like. Sort of atheism doesn't offer, for example, community support. Really, it doesn't offer Sunday services. It doesn't offer, there's not the atheist band, playing on a Friday and playing the performances on the Sundays. We just don't have that level of, there's not that sort of organization. So when people sort of say theism and atheism are sort of opposing sides, they're not even remotely equivalent. And one thing you mentioned was the sort of community sense of religion, and that to you a community was a big part of it. How did you find squaring that with sort of transitioning towards becoming an atheist or letting go of God?
Well, it coincided with just finding new communities. I had moved. I went to college out of state, and I found my own little community there. And I actually did go to church in a couple times. I went to college in New York, so I went to church a couple of times there, and it was such a different environment. It was very just somber and just kind of dreary. And that just turned me off of it really quickly. Church was, it was joyful. It was a celebration. There was, happy music. The area where I'm from has a lot of immigrants from Latin America, and sometimes we would go to the Spanish Mass, and they were having a party. It was just fun. And when I went to, and there's probably plenty of churches everywhere that have that kind of mood, but not the first one that I tried out when I went to New York. So excuse me for a second. I think I have something in my eye.
Go sort that out. That's okay.
Okay, I totally had an eyelash sticking out of my eye, so it's gone now.
I hate eye things.
Why is this happening?
Everybody doing this to me today? I was on a stream on Wednesday, I think it was, and my friend mentioned eye stuff, and I revealed that I'm very not squeamish about anything except for eye things. And
of course, I shouldn't have told you that.
No, it's perfectly fine. It's just amusing to me that it keeps coming up recently. You okay now? You sure you're
yeah,
good?
I'm good.
Okay, perfect. So you went to these other churches that didn't have the quite so exciting and interesting mood and atmosphere.
Yeah, and also I already knew people at the school that I was friends with and hung out with. I was very, very lucky to meet my best friend at that school. She was my assigned roommate at orientation before we even got our dorm assignments. I know a lot of people who struggle with finding a good friend group in college if they go to college, especially. And we just, I just found her right away. She was the first person that I met there. And we did room together for 2 out of the 4 years. The first year we didn't. The first year I had a roommate who just, she was an international student. She was not very comfortable in English, and she had her own group of friends who were the other international students that she hung out with. And I just remember gosh, if I were dependent on my first roommate in my first dorm to be a social group, I would be out of luck right now. But I didn't, because I just went to the other dorm and hung out there. So I just kind of lucked into a nice community. And one of the girls that I met really, really early, do you ever meet someone who just is a networker? That is just who they are. They know everybody. They meet everybody. They just aggressively know 500 different people very well somehow. Well, that was her. And like, I'm not that person. I am pretty quiet. I'm pretty introverted. I feel kind of, it's just like, wow, I'm talking to a stranger on YouTube right now. This is not a thing I usually do. I might look like it is. I might look like I'm completely
Turns
confused.
out it is something I do quite a lot. It's fine. Don't worry. You get used to it is my advice.
Well, she just brought me people, which was great, because left on my own, I would have, maybe had like 2 friends, but because she was one of those, I had a lot. So I didn't feel like I needed the church for community. Like, that just kind of happened. We gamed a lot. That was when I found video gaming, which is one of my main hobbies now.
That's about as close as I've had to a religious experience. Is a deep and lasting relationship with video games. Yeah.
And there's community there. I remember when I was like,
not always a good one, but
when I was in high school, I thought, I don't want to get into video games because that's something you do alone in your basement, and I was really wrong. So
the best man at my wedding was somebody I met playing Call of Duty about sort of 15 years before online, just randomly in a lobby. We just bumped into each other.
I have friends that I have now been playing with for like 11 years. And I don't have friends that I interact with in person that I've had for even a tiny fraction of that, because everybody moves. And I'm one of everybody that moves. So like I moved here 3 years ago, and I had a group of friends that we played D&D and some other stuff in person, and it was great. There's like 2 left now. Like, everyone else has moved out of the city, like far distances. Across
but
the country.
There's always another D&D group. There's always you can always find them. They're everywhere. That we're probably more ubiquitous than the Catholic Church at this point. There's D&D groups everywhere. You will find a support group, and they are
where people find their community.
I love the transition from Catholicism to D&D. I think that's exactly the right trajectory. It's fantastic.
That's my trajectory. Catholicism.
That's awesome.
D&D.
So you found Anthony's videos on YouTube. So I guess kind of one of the questions I like to ask people is, like, YouTube usually recommends these things because you've been searching for stuff and the sorts of things. So what kind of things do you think you were searching for and you're interested in that led you to come across Anthony's videos?
It was actually a link to one of Anthony's videos on Reddit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was really Reddit. And
awesome.
it was not religion that I was looking at. I think it was what even was it? I don't know. I was going down a rabbit hole about something. It was probably anti-vax.
Sorry, was that?
It was probably looking for evidence against the anti-vax. I guess that would
be yeah.
What's the term for the opposite?
Against the anti-vax movement?
Yes.
Yes.
I think that's
anti-vax. Just vax.
And I think I stumbled upon the link to the SE subreddit as a way to have hard conversations.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think in terms of prescient, difficult conversations that might need to be had with people, I think that's definitely up there on the list of important ones, I think. And I think SE's one of the things that I think is brilliantly useful about SE when it's done right, especially, is that it allows you to be open and empathetic to people who you disagree with. And I think being empathetic to people who... It's very easy to be angry with people, especially in the sort of vaccination space, where people's decisions are really having massive impacts on social outcomes. I think trying to be open to the reasons why people might be afraid or uncomfortable, for example, with vaccinations, what their actual genuine concerns are, rather than dismiss them as just being dumb, stupid people that just aren't listening and don't understand rational thoughts. That kind of rhetoric doesn't help anybody. And actually, empathy is a huge part of SE. In order to really question somebody, you really have to try to see the world from their perspective and then ask them genuine and honest questions. And I think Essie's great in that backspace, so that's cool.
Some of Anthony's videos on non-religious stuff, it's just like, this is for everything. This could be for everything. The other Reddit rabbit hole that I might have gone down was, I mean, abortion's been in the news so much lately, so I've gone down that might be, it was either that or end of vax is how I found it.
That's cool.
I had some friends had a knockdown, drag-out fight about abortion last weekend.
You have some very fighty friends, it seems.
Well, so this was also over Discord, and they had a politics channel, and I muted it as soon as they made it, and I never looked at it. And someone left the server, and I was like, oh, God.
Right.
And I went and looked, and it's just like, oh, wow, this has all been happening.
It feels like discourse is even worse online, though, because somehow it's not real. It's sort of, discourse is the social decency conventions seem to break down almost immediately in text. It's people...
I think a big part of it, and this is something that I've thought a lot about, is how important tone of voice is in conveying your intention. Because I have some friends who, like, when someone says something that is potentially offensive, the first place my mind goes is, did they mean that to be offensive? And then
That's a good question to ask.
Yeah, one of my friends that I spend a lot of time with, the first place his mind goes is to be offended, to correct that person or to avoid that person, even if the situation is something in which, like, they were honestly making a joke, or they were just honestly making a mistake. Like, I remember when I was little, I said, I don't even remember what the word is, but me and some other friends were messing around and swapping letters, and gosh, what was it? I don't remember what the word is.
Probably couldn't say it on YouTube anyway.
yeah, I probably couldn't. So if I remember it, I won't say it. But there was some word that was a racial slur, not something that I'd ever heard of in America.
Right.
And it was a European, like, in Europe, it would have mattered if I said this. In America, it's just a silly word that I have not heard since. And we were just playing around with, like Mad Libs or something like that. And we came up with this word, and we were giggling. And, someone, corrected us and got really mad at us that we were saying that, and was like really angry. And we backed off right away, so sorry. And it's just like, that was not a situation where we were attempting to offend somebody.
Yeah.
And that's kind of an extreme example, because, like, the people that I interact with now, we're all adults. We're in our 30s. We should know when something might be offensive, but...
I wish it was an extreme example. I fear it's not that extreme or uncommon.
Yeah. I mean, it's common. It's just like, who knows what... And there are so many.
It's interesting. When people feel like they're offended by something... It's like giving them a license to escalate the response and the nature of that response, and I think that it's a very dangerous thing to feel so self-righteously confident that you should be escalating right now, and that's what essentially offense taking does. It means I now can escalate and become less reasonable and more angry and hurt and offended and lash out more because I have this license to do that. And of course that just means that whatever has caused this, if it's a misunderstanding or whatever it isn't going to get any easier to resolve with this now escalation of tension. One of the principal rules of SC's Discord server is to help people or remind people to operate with the principle of charity at all times. And the principle of charity just says, try to interpret everybody's statements or actions in the most charitable version of why they might do something, and that is actually kind of hard to do because the impulse to be annoyed at somebody saying something is strong in a lot of people, but secondarily it's also quite noticeably unnatural, because actually what a lot of people look to do is they look to find the opportunity to be offended or hurt or annoyed or angry.
Yeah,
they look for the worst
I know some
possible
people
motives.
in that category too. And the first one that came to my mind when you said that, in that person's case, I think they have suffered a bunch. This person is gay, and this is a coworker of mine. And I mean, I've worked in places where like misogyny was a real thing that was apparent and needed to be addressed. And fortunately, I've had, the people that needed to address it did. In the workplace that I shared with this coworker, it just was really not there. It just didn't feel like it was there. It felt like they were fighting a battle on a front where the battle wasn't happening. And it's just like, this is a horrible thing that happens in the world, and it is, but it's not happening right here. I'm in a very technological field, and there are very few women in my department, but that's not something that like the head of my department can fix right now in a meeting. Like that starts, I do 3D modeling, 3D animation.
Awesome.
Yes,
oh, okay.
Everybody I work with is a nerd. But
give me one hot second, because I'm just going to need to take a moment, because I really want to talk to you about that, because I'm a massive nerd too. But we're going to have to pencil that for after this conversation. But I put a pin in that one because I will
talk about that all day.
Excellent.
But yeah, so long story short, this coworker stood up in a meeting and made a big fuss about how fewer women got promoted than men. I mean, there are fewer women than men in the company. It would be kind of weird in my mind if the same number got promoted, because and then and it goes all the way back to, like, I would say probably childhood. Don't more childhood gamers, aren't more of those male than female?
Yeah, maybe.
It really seemed like it is. Like on every gaming server that I've been on, and I'm in like 7 or 8 big ones with hundreds of people, like it's vastly male. I feel like everyone that I know who's in 3D is in 3D because they love video games. And so, I mean, it's just like, I mean, I don't deny that, more men than women got promoted. And I don't deny that there are places of work where it's a big problem, and, qualified women are being passed over by less qualified men. But it's just like, so I would, in that situation, I thought about, okay, who got promoted, and do I think they deserve their promotion? And there was no one on the list that I thought, well, that person's, lazy or brand new or not a good employee or toxic or whatever. I couldn't think of anybody on the list of promotions
more deserving,
where I was questioning it. And so I don't know, I just feel like, that coworker had probably been in situations where, things are really bad, and was in fight mode and was taking that fight to a place where I don't know, like.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I mean, recognizing that the notion, the idea of fight mode is like important. And one of the things that could be too easily fallen into is on the face of it, this seems like this person is making an irrational claim about what should be being done, because the circumstances don't comport with the reality that she's trying to get to. And yet, at the same time, I think there's probably genuinely good reasons that could be explored to try to understand, firstly, why she feels the way she does, and why she believes that the outcome is needed that she does. But honestly, these are such complicated issues, and I think it's useful to raise them. I mean, in some sense, you might genuinely argue why video games are more popular amongst boys than girls, like in general. And I think that the answer to that might be that mostly they're created by boys. Well, at some point there's got to have been some genesis to this, and it possibly is maybe a bias in the study of you could say that there's maybe a gender bias in mathematics and science and programming, but then again, you could say there's also maybe there is a predisposition in the gender demographics that results in those outcomes. I mean, it's a genuinely interesting area to explore, right? Because if there is a problem of just like there is just some kind of gender-based biasing, then that's something we should fix. But the illusion of a gender-based biasing is also a possible outcome here, and it would be useful to explore those things. It doesn't help anybody at all getting up and getting angry with each other about saying, hey, I just feel that this outcome should be different, or this is an example, or even that I feel that person hasn't got a point and should just be ignored and is just crazy. None of those things are helpful, and all of those sorts of things you see on the internet played out on a daily basis. So I think SE would be a great way to explore that person's confidence.
I mean, a conversation in which you went through person by person of the promotions, and what did they do that gave them the edge? They would have had an answer. I think I can think of it. I can also think of lots of people who it would have been great if they could get promoted, but they didn't, because there's a limit. So, and
also like being angry and being frustrated in a system, and maybe seeing it a certain way is going to lead to her, for example, feeling worse on a day-to-day basis. Like I can't imagine. I think if you were to be in the tech industry, I mean, I'm in tech as well, and so I absolutely recognize there's a gender bias, right? And I also recognize that IT companies would do anything to address that, but they just can't. There just aren't the number of candidates are just not entering the market with anything like an even distribution across the gender demographics. But like the reality is, like, if I was feeling this way in my job, and I'm in IT, and I was a woman, I think I would be increasingly finding lots of evidence to feel more miserable in my day-to-day life, right? And I don't think that would make for a very happy person. So again, if that person could think this through and actually maybe understand the different parts of why she's feeling the way she's feeling, like what, and then sort of go through and unpack them, and maybe she can be more focused on the parts that maybe something could be done about, and less focused on the parts that maybe are making her feel miserable, that maybe are just irrational conclusions, perhaps based on either bad information or misunderstandings or whatever it may be. But yeah, SE would be great for that kind of thing. I think SE in the workplace in general is actually a useful tool, because the workplace can often be a place where, like, personality conflicts, hierarchies, people with experience overriding people without experience, despite their ideas maybe being better, all kinds of things like this go on. And actually the ability to respectfully and politely challenge people can be quite difficult. So rather than saying, oh, I think you're wrong, or I think we should do X and you think we should do Y, you can use the tools of SE can be really useful to say, okay, so you think we should do Y, okay, so what's your confidence that Y is the right thing, and how did you get to that position? Because by exploring somebody's epistemology, not only do you get to maybe identify where they've made a mistake, or help them understand where they've made a mistake, but also you may end up coming away being more convinced, because now you understand the steps that they've gone through to get to this conclusion. So now you're better informed as to why actually maybe X does make more sense. So yeah, I think SE in the workplace is super useful. And it could
build trust.
Yeah.
Because if mentally you're in a place where management is the enemy, anything management says, you can contort into being malicious or a lie.
And again, it's going to make your world miserable. It's going to make you feel like you're working for evil people, and you maybe you are, but it's really worth making sure that that's definitely the truth here. Like, it's really worth checking that your claim that, for example, management are just evil and they don't care, it's really worth exploring that claim, because if you're wrong about that, you might be feeling very negatively to a group of people that don't deserve it, and it might and that might affect your job or your ability to perform well or your sense of well-being. So yeah, I think all of these things are great. I think the workplace is riddled with SEable claims. So yeah, I like this a lot. This is cool. so many places to go. Amanda, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's been super fun, and I'm really glad that we did this. I think it might be a cool place to put in it for now, but I'd love to talk to you again sometime. And I know you mentioned that you might want to explore some SE claims at some point, so I would love to do that with you.
Yeah,
also.
that would be interesting.
I'm
also happy to answer any questions you might have about 3D related things.
Oh, we are going to, as soon as this video is ended, I'm going to be all about that. Don't even worry.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think this would be a great place to end the interview. But is there anything else about you that you'd like the community to know about you? Any hobbies, or you mentioned D&D and 3D? Is there anything else that you'd like the community to know about you?
Not at the moment. I just I'm looking forward to actually trying out the process of SE on either end of it. I know that there's practice sessions.
Yes.
Yeah, super new. Found it last weekend. Haven't opened it until today.
I think you'll find yourself very welcome. I think you're sounding like you're going to be a great addition to the community. So yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. And I look forward to hearing how it goes at work if you become more familiar with it.
Thank you for having me.
But yeah, thanks so much, Amanda. Take care, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
All right.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.